From the moment Karma the Dark World on PlayStation 5 was revealed, it felt like a whisper from the same dream world Hideo Kojima calls home. Cryptic, unnerving, and just stylized enough to feel dangerous. Its debut trailer didn't pitch a premise so much, it broadcast a mood, flickering screens, shifting architecture, characters with TVs for heads, and just enough narrative suggestion to make you lean in. Basically, came away with more questions than answers, which in the psychological thriller genre, it's often the best sign. So what happens when you step inside that dream? Let's find out. If you enjoyed today's review, consider subscribing, that helps out the channel a huge amount. The story in Karma the Dark World doesn't disappoint, but it's a slower burn than I expected. Now you play as Daniel McGovern, an agent working for a sprawling surveillance state known as the Leviathan Corporation. Your job? It's to dive into suspects' memories to uncover potential threats to the regime. But naturally, things, they aren't what they seem. As Daniel digs deeper, reality begins to warp, and the game's internal logic bends into something more dreamlike, something that mirrors the surreal intensity teased in that first trailer. Now that trailer hinted at a barrage of cryptic imagery and narrative fragments, and to its credit, the game absolutely delivers on that front. But in terms of pacing, it trades the trailer's quick-cut intensity for something far more deliberate, drawn-out conversations, context that assembles itself in fragments, and a world that's as intriguing as it is quietly horrifying. That Kojima energy I mentioned earlier, that fades as the hours go on. This is more David Lynch by way of Kafka, abstract, disorientating, and occasionally a little too aware of its influences. One level is basically a straight lift from the Twin Peaks Red Room, but others, I will say, land with real style and restraint. Now, is it perfect narratively? Not quite. The writing is strong about 90% of the time, but every so often it slips, replacing subtlety with a heavy-handed line that didn't need to be spelled out. Some overacting here and there as well, but look, still, as a whole, it's a vibe. A strange, unnerving, oddly compelling vibe. And yeah, it runs around 5 hours, and that length feels just right. Now that I've touched on the pacing and somewhat alluded to the shape of the experience, it's worth clarifying exactly what Karma the Dark World is, and at its core, this is a slow burn psychological thriller. Some have called it horror, and while it certainly has its moments, this isn't a game built around jump scares or gore. The dread here is thematic, lingering, structural, and soaked not just into the architecture of the world, but into the things that inhabit it. Now there are monsters, manifestations of fear, trauma, and surveillance that punctuate the more abstract narrative beats, but even then, their presence feels more symbolic than sensational. They add tension, yes, but the horror here is rooted in atmosphere and implication rather than adrenaline. It's unnerving, not loud. Now, as for the gameplay, it's not demanding either. For lack of a better term, this is a walking simulator, though yes, you can sprint. There's no combat, no elaborate action set pieces. The closest the game gets to intensity, a few chase sequences involving those aforementioned creatures, and even those feel quite measured. Now, is the gameplay good in the traditional sense? Honestly, it's okay. Functional, serviceable. The real draw is that atmosphere, the narrative, and the way the world coils around your perception. Daniel moves fine, if a little clunkily, and most of your time is spent interacting with objects, either to uncover clues or solve light environmental puzzles. And on that front, I wish there was more creativity. The puzzles are basic, things you've seen a dozen times before. Find a code using CCTV, locate a fuse to restore power. Nothing offensive, just, I guess, uninspired. One mechanic I absolutely despised, however, that was opening doors. Random, I know, but it is genuinely awkward. You have to hold a button to grip the handle, then you push or pull manually. I assume the idea was to let you peek in carefully, maybe build tension, but in practice, I ended up flinging them open out of frustration. It almost feels like a leftover from a VR build, which is strange since this isn't a VR game. Honestly though, from this mechanic alone, you can see it would be near perfect fit for one, so I'm hoping that is in the game's future. Now, where the game does excel on a gameplay front is when it leans into its surreal design. One standout location has you moving faster with each door you open, turning basic navigation into this strange, spiraling descent. Other areas flicker, rotate, or trap you in looping locations. It's here where the game bends its simple mechanics into something really unique, and it really shines. The interrogations too, while not especially flexible, are a strong concept, linking with a character and exploring their memories, piecing together identity from someone else's broken perspective. These sequences aren't mechanically deep, but they're thematically rich. Performance-wise, I played on PlayStation 5 Pro and it was mostly solid. That said, I did notice some slight stutters during transitions, and there's a few moments where the frame rate doesn't feel entirely locked. Nothing major, just enough to notice. The funny thing is though, I'm not entirely sure whether it was the system or the game itself by design. Karma's world is constantly shifting, warping, and doing its best to disorientate you, so half the time I couldn't tell if it was a technical hiccup or just almost another part of the psychological sleight of hand. Either way, it never pulled me out of the experience, and I did want to give it a brief mention. Visually, Karma the Dark World is incredibly impressive, especially for an indie release. The world is incredibly realised, and the constant shifts in tone and setting always managed to surprise me. It moves fluidly from dystopian to worn to industrial to clean to surreal to just downright creepy. It's constantly challenging you to question what you're actually seeing. Characters with TV for heads, for example, abstract interiors, flickering environments. It commits to the weird and it sells it, which is exactly what they needed to do. Now, is it the best looking indie I've seen? Not quite. That crown for me still goes to Nobody Wants to Die. But Karma is absolutely up there, and the world building is consistently strong. Now that said, I did run into a few minor visual issues, some light clipping here and there at one point, an object floated straight through a table, which will make sense if you play it. It definitely wasn't supposed to happen. And a small nitpick here, but when you pick up notes or letters, the text is initially blurred and unreadable unless you zoom in. It's a small thing, but given how good everything else looks, I'm not sure why they made that design decision. Audio then is one of Karma's big wins, probably its biggest. In fact, these environments aren't just visually rich, they're layered with sound in a way that gives them life. Distant machinery, ambient hums, distorted echoes, creatures. It all builds a soundscape that makes even empty spaces feel charged. The voice work is strong across the board. Occasionally a character will overact or miss the mark, but for the most part it is grounded, I guess, in the sense of this world, and convincing. The soundtrack then, just incredible. Not even sure how to describe it properly. The instrumentation is beautiful. It's haunting without being overbearing, but it's the vocals that elevate it. They feel mournful, dissonant, occasionally operatic, and somehow they capture the horror of this place in a way that visuals alone couldn't. I've been listening to it offline since finishing the game, and honestly, it's about the highest compliment I can give when it comes to sound. So overall, for the right kind of player, Karma the Dark World really works. It's not about combat or deep mechanics, it's about atmosphere, tone, and slow storytelling. Gameplay largely takes a backseat to what's unfolding in front of you, and if that's not your thing, this won't change your mind. But if you're into narrative-driven games, and you can appreciate something a little offbeat, there is a lot here to enjoy. So yeah, it's not perfect, but it knows what it wants to be, and for the most part, it pulls it off. Today, it's a great 8 out of 10, and if you're still sitting there thinking, is this game for me? Answer me this. Did you play and enjoy games like Observer or Soma? If so, it's probably going to be worth adding to the library. And that is the review down. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you've been playing the game or you're considering picking it up, let me know your questions, let me know your thoughts. Love to hear it. And yeah, if you enjoyed this one today, do me a favor and subscribe, and I'll see you all on the next video. Cheers all.